Sometimes people come to me not only for advice, but also for the right to speak their mind. Recently, a man came to the parish. He looked as if his world had collapsed before his eyes. Sitting down opposite me, he was silent for a long time, and then he spoke. His words were full of bitterness that had accumulated in his heart over many years. Today, I want to share his story with you. It is a story that reminds us how fragile human relationships can be. Here are his words. My name is Declan Mortensen. I am 53 years old, and I am the owner of the largest logistics corporation on the West Coast. Over the past 25 years, I have built an empire that transports cargo from Los Angeles to Tokyo with my own fleet of 43 ships and a network of warehouses in 7 countries. My company, Mortensen Global Logistics, handles over 2 million containers a year and brings in over $500 million in revenue annually. I live in Beverly Hills with my wife Vivian, who devoted herself to charity work after leaving her career as a financial advisor and now heads the board of trustees of the Museum of Contemporary Art. We have 2 children. Our son Blake, 28, graduated from Stanford with an MBA and works as vice president of business development at my company, and our daughter Serena, 24, is studying international relations at the University of Southern California while interning at a diplomatic mission. Blake lives in his own $1.5 million apartment in Santa Monica, while Serena still lives with us in our mansion on Rodeo Drive. That morning, Wednesday, May 10th, I sat in my office on the 37th floor of a tower in downtown Los Angeles, looking out at the city through floor-to-ceiling panoramic windows. Outside the window stretched an endless ocean of rooftops, interspersed with the greenery of parks and the glint of glass skyscrapers. Roderick Steinbeck, my business partner and best friend for 20 years, sat across from me at a massive mahogany desk, poring over a stack of documents several inches thick. Roderick was 2 years older than me, a former federal prosecutor who had left the legal profession for business and never regretted it. His analytical mind and extensive connections in government circles had saved our company from trouble more than once and helped us win lucrative contracts. The office was furnished with the quiet dignity befitting the head of a large corporation. Antique furniture, impressionist paintings on the walls, a collection of rare books on the history of navigation. 25 years of success had taught me to appreciate beautiful things, but I never forgot that all of this was the result of hard work and good decisions. Declan, the figures for Pacific Logistics look even worse than we thought, said Roderick, without looking up from the financial report. Their debts exceed the value of their assets by 38%. If we take them over, we'll gain access to their routes in Southeast Asia and contracts with the region's largest ports, but at the same time, we'll inherit all their financial problems. I leaned back in my leather chair and rubbed my temples. Pacific Logistics had been our main competitor in the region for the past 10 years, but over the last 2 years, the company had been in serious crisis. Their founder, 75-year-old Charles Preston, had made too many strategic mistakes in his attempts to aggressively expand the business and was now desperately looking for a buyer willing to take on his debts. We desperately need their exclusive contracts with the ports of Singapore, Hong Kong, and Shanghai, I replied, getting up and walking over to the window. Without them, we won't be able to compete effectively with Chinese state-owned companies. They are dumping prices so aggressively that they will soon completely squeeze private American firms out of the Asian market. And that's a third of our global turnover. Roderick nodded and turned another page of the report. His gray hair was neatly combed back, and his expensive dark blue Armani suit fit his trim figure perfectly. Despite being 55, he looked younger than many 40-year-olds and took care of himself with the meticulousness of a former military prosecutor. In his time, Roderick had successfully prosecuted organized crime, which taught him to be extremely attentive to detail and not to trust pretty promises. I have conducted a thorough analysis of their personnel and logistical capabilities, he continued, putting down one folder and picking up the next. Of the 2,300 employees, half will have to be laid off within the first 6 months, and the rest will have to be retrained to our corporate standards and procedures. This will take at least 6 months of active work and require an additional investment of $7.5 million, not counting severance pay. We worked out every aspect of the potential deal in detail until late in the evening. Roderick insisted on an even more thorough and comprehensive review of their Asian contracts, especially those signed in the last 2 years, suspecting hidden obligations. I wanted to move much faster, knowing that other major players in the market, including several European giants, were also eyeing Pacific Logistics assets. By 7:30 in the evening, we agreed to meet with the entire team of corporate lawyers the next day to finalize all the terms of our purchase offer. By the way, how is Blake doing with his new contract in Mexico? Roderick asked, gathering his documents into his briefcase. He's doing great, I replied proudly. Last week, he closed a deal with Mexicana Cargo for $15 million a year. The boy definitely inherited my business acumen. And Serena? How are her studies going? Great. She plans to apply for a master's degree in international relations next year, possibly at Georgetown. She wants to specialize in trade diplomacy. Roderick smiled. He was a bachelor and often said that my children were the only thing that sometimes made him regret not having a family of his own. The drive home to Beverly Hills took almost an hour in the usual evening traffic. My black Bentley Mulsanne crawled slowly through the crowded streets of the metropolis as I listened to the latest news from Asian markets and reflected on how dramatically international business had changed in recent years. When I started my career 25 years ago, all you needed was a few dozen trucks, good relations with the port authorities, and reliable customers. Now I had to battle daily with international corporations that could afford to operate at a loss for years on end, just to capture strategically important market segments and squeeze out their competitors. The mansion on Rodeo Drive greeted me with soft golden light in the windows and the appetizing smell of dinner coming from the spacious kitchen. The house was built in the 1930s in the Spanish colonial style. I bought it 17 years ago and have been constantly improving it ever since. Now it was a veritable palace, nearly 1,000 square meters in size with a swimming pool, tennis court, and garden maintained by a team of 5 gardeners. Vivian had already set the table in the large dining room overlooking the courtyard. She looked impeccable, as always. Her blonde hair was styled elegantly, and her emerald Versace dress accentuated her slender figure and graceful posture. At 50, my wife could give many 30-year-old models a run for their money, and I often caught men admiring her at social events. Vivian possessed that rare combination of natural beauty and aristocratic manners that made her the center of attention in any society. "How's the Pacific Logistics takeover going?" she asked, handing me a glass of aged Bordeaux from our collection. "It's too early to say for sure, but there's definitely a chance," I replied, sitting down at the table and enjoying the cool air conditioning after a hot day. Roderick is digging through their financial documents like a real archaeologist. He's afraid we'll be buying a pig in a poke and end up with more problems than profits. "He's always been cautious," Vivian remarked, pouring mineral water into glasses. "Remember how he talked you out of buying that shipping company in Seattle? And he was absolutely right. 6 months later, it turned out they had serious problems with the tax authorities. Serena came down to dinner 10 minutes late, as usual. My daughter was almost an exact copy of her mother in her youth. The same regular features, the same emerald green eyes and long platinum hair, which she usually wore loose. But her personality was much more explosive and independent. From early childhood, Serena had been stubborn, sharp-witted, and determined to prove her independence and ability to make her own decisions at all costs. "Sorry I'm late," she said, quickly sitting down in her usual place to my right. "We had an extended lecture on international maritime law, and Professor Jenkins couldn't stop talking about the latest changes in the conventions." Vivian smiled softly and began to carefully pour pumpkin soup into porcelain bowls. Family dinners had been a sacred tradition in our home for over 20 years, even if we had to adjust to complicated university schedules, business trips, and social events. "How's your internship at the French Consulate General?" I asked, taking a sip of wine. "It's going great, Dad. Next week, I'm being transferred from the Archives Department to the Trade Department. I'll be helping to prepare official documents for French business delegations and analyzing trade agreements between our countries." We talked in detail about her academic achievements, her plans for the summer holidays, and the upcoming charity art exhibition in support of children with cancer, which Vivian was organizing. It was a normal, relaxed family conversation over dinner with my closest loved ones, and nothing foreshadowed that in a few minutes my calm and predictable life would begin to rapidly fall apart. The waitress brought the main course, Salmon fillet with grilled vegetables and saffron rice. Serena finished her glass of white wine and suddenly looked at us with a special seriousness and barely noticeable excitement. I knew that look well from her childhood. That was how she looked when she was about to tell us something really important or ask permission for something out of the ordinary. "Mom, Dad, I want to tell you something," she began, slightly nervous and fiddling with her napkin. "Last week, at an official diplomatic reception at the French Consulate General, I met a very interesting person. His name is Ethan Reynolds." Vivian immediately perked up and leaned forward, putting down her fork. Like any mother, she was always particularly interested in the young men who appeared in her daughter's life. "Tell me more about him, dear. Who is he? What does he do? Where is he from?" "Ethan runs his own hedge fund called Reynolds Capital Partners," Serena replied, her voice clearly tinged with pride and admiration. "He specializes in high-risk investments in promising technology startups, especially in the fields of artificial intelligence and biotechnology. Ethan is incredibly intelligent, highly educated, fluent in 4 languages, and has a master's degree in economics." I felt a slight but distinct uneasiness, not because I was fundamentally opposed to my daughter's romantic relationships. At 24, she had every right to date whomever she wanted. It was the tone she used when talking about Ethan that caused my concern. Over the years of fatherly experience, I had learned to recognize when young women began to speak about a man in such an enthusiastic voice, it meant they were already hopelessly in love. "How old is he? Where did he go to school?" I asked, trying to keep my tone as neutral and interested as possible. 29. Ethan was born and raised in Boston, graduated from Dartmouth College with honors, and then earned an MBA from Harvard. After college, he worked for several years as an analyst at a large investment firm on Wall Street, and 4 years ago, he moved to California and started his own investment fund. Vivian nodded approvingly as she sipped her wine. She always liked it when our children's potential partners had a solid education, a prestigious job, and a stable high income. As a former financial advisor, she understood the value of financial stability in a relationship. "Where exactly did you meet him?" "Tell me more about that evening," I continued my cautious questioning. "At a reception in honor of the arrival of a French trade delegation that came to discuss new investment opportunities in California. Ethan was there as a representative of private American investors interested in collaborating with European technology startups. We happened to strike up a conversation at the buffet table about the impact of international trade on the development of innovative technologies, and it turned out that we had a surprising number of common interests and views on the modern economy." Serena was clearly trying very hard to make a favorable impression on us with her story about her new acquaintance. She enthusiastically described in great detail his erudition, his deep knowledge of international politics and modern economic theory, and his to hold an intellectual conversation on virtually any topic, from classical literature to quantum physics. "That sounds really interesting," Vivian remarked cautiously. "What can you tell us about his family, his parents, his background?" "Ethan comes from a very respectable and intelligent family," Serena replied proudly. "His father is a cardiac surgeon at one of Boston's best private clinics, and his mother teaches art history at Harvard University and is the author of several academic monographs. They are a very educated and cultured family indeed." I continued to eat in silence, but listened carefully to every word my daughter said. Something about this perfect story seemed suspiciously correct to me, as if it had been carefully rehearsed. A young, successful hedge fund manager with an impeccable pedigree, an education from the country's best universities, and extensive international connections. People like this are usually long married to women from their social circle, or at the very least, in serious long-term relationships. "I really want you to meet Ethan in person," Serena said unexpectedly, her eyes literally glowing with anticipation. "Maybe we could invite him over for dinner next weekend? I'm sure you'll enjoy talking to him." Vivian instantly and enthusiastically agreed to the idea, but I was internally conflicted. On the one hand, it was perfectly natural and appropriate to get to know the young man, who was clearly seriously interested in my only daughter. On the other hand, my fatherly intuition, honed by years of doing business and interacting with all kinds of people, urged me to exercise extreme caution. "Of course, dear," I finally said, deciding not to show my doubts. It will be very interesting to talk to him and get to know him better. Cyrena literally beamed with joy and immediately began to enthusiastically plan the upcoming evening. She wanted to order a special festive menu from our regular chef, buy several bottles of rare French wine from collectible grape varieties, order fresh flowers to decorate the dining room, and prepare the house to receive a truly important guest. Her enthusiasm and sincere joy were both touching and disturbing. After dinner, when Vivian went to her studio to work on a charity exhibition project, and Serena went up to her room to prepare for tomorrow's university classes, I retired to my spacious study on the second floor and once again carefully considered everything I had heard during the evening. A 29-year-old hedge fund manager who specializes in high-risk investments in technology startups and still finds time to attend diplomatic receptions and social events. Perhaps I had indeed become overly suspicious and cautious with age, but the whole story seemed somewhat artificial and carefully thought out to me. However, in a few days, I would be able to meet the mysterious Ethan Reynolds in person and form my own independent opinion about his character, intentions, and true nature. On Saturday evening, our house was being prepared for the guest's arrival with particular care. Serena spent the whole day making preparations, as if she were preparing for a state reception. She personally supervised every detail, from the fresh white orchids in crystal vases to the polishing of the silverware. Chef Carlos was instructed to prepare an exquisite five-course menu, including lobsters delivered that morning directly from Maine. In the wine cellar, I personally selected a bottle of 1982 Chateau Margaux, a $3,000 wine that we usually only opened on the most special occasions. Blake arrived at 6 p.m., as I had requested. My son looked impeccable in a dark blue Brioni suit and the Swiss Patek Philippe watch I had given him for his graduation from Stanford. In recent years, Blake had become a true professional, confident, analytical, and completely devoted to the family business. He had inherited my practical mind and ability to quickly assess people. "So who is this guy that Serena raves about?" he asked, taking a glass of whiskey from me. "I don't know yet," I replied honestly, "but something about this story doesn't sit right with me. Everything is too smooth and perfect." "I see. Do you want me to check him out a little?" "Be careful. Serena is clearly head over heels in love, and she takes any criticism personally." At exactly 7 o'clock, a car pulled up to our gate. Through the office window, I saw a silver Maserati Gran Turismo, a car worth about $150,000. For a 29-year-old hedge fund manager, it was a very respectable choice, but not overly ostentatious. A tall, dark-haired man in an impeccably tailored black suit got out of the car. Even from a distance, it was clear that he moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to attention and success. Ethan Reynolds made a mixed impression on me from the very first seconds of our acquaintance. Outwardly, he looked exactly as a successful young financier should look: fit and athletic, with an expensive haircut, impeccable manners, and a friendly smile. But there was something in his eyes that seemed too scrutinizing to me, as if he were constantly evaluating those around him and calculating his options. "Mr. Mortensen, it's a great honor to finally meet you," he said, extending his hand for a firm handshake. "Siren has told me so much about her wonderful family." His voice was pleasant, with a barely noticeable Eastern accent, which he was obviously trying to hide. His handshake was firm but not too strong, just as they teach in business school. "Welcome to our home, Ethan," I replied. "Siren has also told me a lot about you." He presented Vivian with a luxurious bouquet of 36 red roses and a bottle of Dom Perignon from the 2008 vintage. His gestures were appropriate, but seemed too rehearsed. "What a beautiful house," Ethan said, looking around the hall with its marble staircase and antique paintings. "Siren said it was built in the 1930s? 1934, Vivian confirmed. "We bought it 17 years ago and completely restored it." "Magnificent work. I see several paintings from private collections. Is that landscape on the right by Sisley?" Vivian raised her eyebrows in surprise. Indeed, hanging on the wall was a small but very valuable work by the Impressionist, which we had purchased at Sotheby's auction 5 years ago. "Are you knowledgeable about painting?" she asked. "A little. I studied art history as a minor in college. The Impressionists have always been my weakness." Serena was literally beaming with pride as she watched her chosen one impress her parents. She was wearing a new blue dress from Chanel, which she had bought especially for this evening, and she looked stunning. We went into the living room where Carlos had already prepared aperitifs. Ethan ordered a martini with olives, which seemed a little old-fashioned for his age. Most young people preferred whiskey or simpler cocktails. Cyrena said you run your own hedge fund, I began the conversation. How long have you been in this business? I started my own fund 4 years ago, but I've been working in finance for 8 years, Ethan replied, settling comfortably into his chair. I started as an analyst at Goldman Sachs, then moved to Morgan Stanley. California seemed like a more promising place for investing in technology. How's it going? The market is pretty unstable right now, Blake remarked. I can't complain. Last year, my fund had a return of 32%. Admittedly, it was an exceptionally good time for technology investments. The figure sounded impressive, but I knew that many managers like to exaggerate their successes, especially when meeting potential investors for the first time. And Ethan clearly viewed our family in just that light. What specific areas do you invest in? Blake continued his questioning. The main focus is on artificial intelligence and biotechnology. I recently invested in several very promising startups in Silicon Valley. One of them is developing a machine learning-based cancer diagnosis system. Sounds interesting, I said. And the size of your fund? Currently managing about $80 million? Ethan replied without hesitation. I plan to bring it to 150 by the end of the year. The conversation continued over dinner. The dining room was lit by candles and large windows offered a view of the illuminated pool and manicured garden. Serena chose a seat next to Ethan and couldn't take her admiring eyes off him. Ethan proved to be an excellent conversationalist. He easily kept up a conversation on any topic, from current politics to classical music. He told anecdotes about famous people he had allegedly met at various events and demonstrated his knowledge of expensive restaurants and elite resorts. By the way, last week I had dinner at the French Laundry with James Cameron, he mentioned casually. We discussed the possibilities of investing in virtual reality technology for cinema. Impressive acquaintances, Vivian remarked. In our business, connections mean a lot. Half of successful deals are made not in offices, but over informal dinners. When the main course was served, Serena suddenly put down her fork and took Ethan's hand. Mom, Dad, Ethan and I have some important news, she said, her voice tinged with excitement. We've decided to get married. A deathly silence fell. I felt my jaw muscles tense. Vivian froze with a glass of wine in her hand. Blake looked intently at Ethan. How romantic, Vivian finally said, but her voice sounded strained. When are you planning the wedding? We haven't set a date yet, Ethan replied with a broad smile, but we'd like to get it over with. Maybe this fall. Isn't that too soon? I asked cautiously. You've only known each other for a week. Serena flashed. Dad, when people love each other, time doesn't matter. We know we're meant to be together. I completely agree with Serena, Ethan added. Sometimes one glance is enough to know that this is the one. The rest of the dinner was tense. Blake asked Ethan technical questions about the securities market and investment strategies. Several times I noticed that Ethan's answers sounded evasive or contained inaccuracies. How do you assess the prospects for the semiconductor sector in light of the trade war with China? Blake asked. I think these are temporary difficulties, Ethan replied. The market always finds ways to adapt. The answer was too general for someone who was supposed to be professionally monitoring these issues. The trade war had a serious impact on the technology sector, and any hedge fund manager should have had a clear position on this issue. What is your risk hedging strategy? Blake continued. Standard portfolio diversification, Ethan replied vaguely. We don't put all our eggs in one basket. It was a platitude that any economics student could have uttered. A real fund manager would have talked about specific instruments, derivatives, options, currency hedging. When Ethan excused himself and went to the bathroom, I quickly exchanged glances with Blake. I could see from his face that he was thinking the same thing. Something's not right here, my son said quietly. I feel it too. Around 10 o'clock, Ethan started getting ready to go home. He said a warm goodbye to everyone, thanked them again for the wonderful evening, and promised to come back soon. I really enjoyed meeting your family, he said to Serena at the door. Now I understand where you get your good manners and sophistication. After he left, we all gathered in the living room. Serene was beaming with happiness, but it was clear from the expressions on the others' faces that their impressions were mixed. "So, what do you think of Ethan?" she asked, expecting unanimous approval. I exchanged glances with Vivian, wondering how best to phrase my doubts. "He's definitely a charming young man," Vivian began cautiously. "But don't you think you're rushing into marriage, dear?" "Mom, I'm a grown woman and I can make my own decisions," Serena snapped. "It's not about your age," I interjected. "It's just that some of his answers seemed inaccurate to me." "What do you mean?" Blake decided to speak up. "Siren, I asked him professional questions about the financial markets. His answers were too general. It seems that he doesn't have a very deep understanding of the areas in which he supposedly specializes." Siren's face flushed with indignation. "I can't believe you interrogated him like a criminal. Ethan simply didn't want to bore us with technical details." "Honey, we're just worried about you," Vivian said gently. "Maybe it's better to get to know each other better before taking such a serious step." "You don't know him at all," Serena snapped. "Ethan is kind, smart, successful. He loves me and I love him. That's enough." "Of course, love is important," I agreed. "But marriage is a serious decision. We just want to make sure you're not making a mistake." "A mistake?" Serena jumped up. "The only mistake is that I hope for your understanding and support. You're acting like snobs who think no one is worthy of your precious daughter." "Siren, calm down," Blake tried to reason with her. "We have nothing against Ethan personally. We just want to be sure of his intentions." "His intentions are completely honest," she shouted. "Unlike yours. You've already decided you don't like him without even giving him a chance." With that, she turned and headed for the stairs. "Siren, wait," Vivian called after her. "Let's talk calmly." "There's nothing to talk about," her daughter threw over her shoulder. "I'm marrying Ethan, whether you like it or not." She climbed the stairs and slammed her bedroom door so hard that the pictures on the wall shook. A heavy silence hung in the living room. "I think we could have expressed our concerns more delicately," Vivian sighed. "Perhaps," I agreed, "but it's better to tell the truth now than to regret it later." Blake twirled a glass of half-finished wine in his hands. "Dad, what if we run a check on him?" Discreetly, of course, just to make sure he's who he says he is. I thought about it. It was a reasonable idea, but if Serena found out, she would never forgive us. "I'll talk to Roderick," I decided. "He has connections that will help us find out the truth without causing a fuss." We discussed the situation for a while longer, but everyone understood that the family peace had been disrupted and it would not be easy to restore it, especially if our suspicions turned out to be true. On Monday morning, I couldn't concentrate on my work. The documents for the Pacific Logistics takeover lay untouched on my desk, and I stared out the window at the gray sky over Los Angeles and thought about Saturday night's dinner. Siren didn't come down to see us that night, and in the morning she left for college without even saying goodbye. Vivian tried to talk to her before she left, but her daughter just nodded and walked out of the house with a stony face. Around noon, I called Roderick and suggested we meet at the Los Angeles Country Club, one of the most exclusive and prestigious establishments in the city, where we could talk quietly without fear of prying ears. The club had been around for over 100 years, and its members were only the most influential people in California. Billion-dollar deals were made here, and issues that never made it into the press were discussed. Roderick arrived at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We settled into the far corner of the library, in leather armchairs by the fireplace, where no one could overhear us. The waiter brought us Hennessy parody cognac and discreetly withdrew. Roderick looked impeccable as always. A gray Armani suit, platinum cufflinks, neatly combed gray hair. His face expressed the professional attention of a man accustomed to listening to complex stories and finding their weak points. "What happened, Declan?" "You sounded worried on the phone," he said, sipping his cognac. I told him in detail about Serena's acquaintance with Ethan, about Saturday's dinner, and my suspicions. Roderick listened silently, only occasionally asking clarifying questions. His face remained impassive, but I knew that behind this calm exterior lay a quick, analytical mind. "I understand your concern," he said when I finished my story. "The story does sound suspicious. Too many correct answers to all the questions. In my experience as a federal prosecutor, people like that usually turn out to be frauds. What do you recommend?" Roderick thoughtfully twirled his glass in his hands. I have contacts at the FBI and the SEC. I can discreetly check whether Reynolds Capital Partners exists and whether Ethan Reynolds is registered as an asset manager. It will take a day or two, and no one will know about the check. What if he's clean? Then you'll apologize to your daughter and give him a chance. But if my suspicions are confirmed, it's better to find out now than after the wedding. We agreed that Roderick would start the check immediately. His connections in law enforcement allowed him to obtain information that was not available to ordinary citizens. Over the years as a federal prosecutor, he had accumulated many debts that he could now use to the benefit of his friends. There's one more thing, Roderick added. If this guy is really a con artist, he's a professional. An amateur wouldn't get involved with a family of your standing. Too many risks and too much attention. What do you mean? If he decided to play this game, then the stakes are very high. Perhaps he knows more about your finances than it seems. This thought sent a chill down my spine. Indeed, information about our family's wealth was not a state secret, but it couldn't be called public knowledge either. If Ethan had studied us in advance, it changed the whole picture. In the evening, I met Blake at his apartment in Santa Monica. My son lived in a modern high-rise complex overlooking the ocean, which he had chosen and bought with his own money. The interior was minimalist. Light colors, modern furniture, no unnecessary details. Blake had always been practical and disliked ostentatious luxury. "How are things with Serena?" he asked, handing me a mug of coffee. "Bad. She won't even talk to us. She left for college this morning without saying a word." Expected. Remember how she reacted when we criticized her choice of friends when she was a child? Blake was right. Since childhood, Serena had been sensitive to any attempts to interfere in her personal life. At 16, she hadn't spoken to us for 2 weeks after we forbade her from dating a classmate who smoked marijuana. Roderick agreed to check out this Ethan through his channels, I said, but I think we should play it safe. A private investigator? Exactly. Do you know anyone reliable? Blake nodded. There's this guy, Mike Connor, former LAPD detective, now working for himself. Very discreet and professional. He's helped us check out potential partners a few times. Get in touch with him. Have him find out everything he can about Ethan Reynolds. Finances, past, connections, all the details will do. What are you going to do about Serena? I had thought long and hard about this question. Direct accusations would only turn her against us even more. We needed a different approach. I'll try to talk to her alone. Maybe in a calm setting, I can change her mind. The next day, I called Serena and suggested we have dinner together at Nobu Malibu, one of the best restaurants in town with an ocean view. It had been her favorite place since childhood, and I hoped that the familiar surroundings would help us find common ground. Why? She asked coldly. I want to apologize for Saturday night and talk to you calmly. Dad, if you're going to criticize Ethan again... No, dear. Just father and daughter, a nice dinner, and an honest conversation. Give me a chance. After a long pause, she agreed. We arranged to meet at 7 o'clock on Wednesday evening. Nobu Malibu was located on the Pacific Ocean, and its panoramic windows offered a stunning view of the sunset. It was a place where Hollywood stars, politicians, and business people dined. Here you could meet Oscar winners at the next table or discuss deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars to the sound of the ocean waves. Serena arrived right on time but looked wary. She was dressed simply, jeans, a white blouse, minimal makeup. It was clear that she didn't want to make this dinner a special event. Hi, Dad, she said reservedly, sitting down at the table by the window. Hi, dear. Thank you for agreeing to come. We ordered food and wine. The conversation was awkward for the first half hour. Serena answered in monosyllables, clearly expecting a trick. I talked about work, asked about her studies, and tried to create a relaxed atmosphere. How are things at the consulate? I asked. Fine. Next week I'm starting work on a trade cooperation project with France. Sounds interesting. What are your plans for the future? Are you still thinking about a master's degree at Georgetown? Serena paused, looking out at the ocean. I don't know. Maybe after the wedding, my plans will change. So we came to the main topic. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. Siren, I want to apologize for Saturday night. Mom and I behaved badly. She looked at me in surprise. Really? Yes. Ethan seems like a nice young man. We were just shocked by the news of the engagement. Any father worries when his daughter makes such an important decision. Serena's face softened. Dad, I understand that it was unexpected. But when you meet the right person, time ceases to matter. Maybe you're right. But let me ask you a few questions. Not as a critical father, but as someone who loves you and wants you to be happy. Okay, she agreed after a pause. You said Ethan manages a hedge fund. Have you seen his office? Not yet. He works mostly from home. He says it's more efficient that way. First red flag. Serious fund managers don't work from home. They need offices, teams of analysts, access to trading terminals. What about his clients? The fund's investors? He doesn't really like to talk about that. Confidentiality and all that, another red flag. Real managers are proud of their clients and achievements. Siren, you're a very smart girl. You have an excellent education and a sharp mind. Don't you find it strange that a successful financier can't answer basic questions about his work? She frowned. What are you talking about? Blake asked him simple professional questions. Any asset manager should know the answers to those. But Ethan responded with vague phrases. Maybe he just didn't want to bore us with technical details. Or maybe he doesn't know those details because he's never managed real investments. Serena put her glass down sharply. I can't believe this. You lured me here under the pretext of apologizing, and now you're accusing Ethan of lying again. I'm not accusing him. I'm just asking you to be careful. Look at the facts objectively. What facts? Your suspicions and prejudices? Siren's voice grew louder, attracting the attention of neighboring tables. Honey, I just want you to be happy and safe. Safe? She stood up from her chair. From what, Dad? From love. From the opportunity to build my own life. From a man who may not be who he claims to be. You know what? Serena grabbed her purse. I understand what this is about. You can't accept that your little girl has grown up and fallen in love. You're used to buying and controlling everyone, but you can't buy love. Serena, calm down. No. Do you think your money gives you the right to interfere in my life? That you can decide who I can and cannot love? People at the neighboring tables were already staring at us openly. I saw someone start to film what was happening on their phone. Serena, let's discuss this at home. At home? She laughed bitterly. This house stopped being a home the moment you decided that Ethan wasn't good enough for your precious daughter. I never said that. You don't need to say it, Dad. It's obvious you think no one is worthy of a girl from the Mortensen family, that all men are only interested in me because of my money. That's not true. No, it is. Tears of anger glistened in her eyes. You're so cynical that you can't believe in true love. For you, everything can be bought and sold. Siren, you're being unfair. Unfair? Is it fair to interrogate my fiancé? Is it fair to accuse him of cheating without any evidence? She leaned across the table toward me, her voice cold and determined. You know what, Dad? Ethan was right when he said that rich people don't understand real feelings. All they care about is money and status. When did he say that? It doesn't matter. What matters is that he was right. You're trying to buy my obedience with this expensive dinner and your false apologies. That's not true and you know it. I know. Do I know that you didn't hire a private investigator to follow Ethan? Or ask your influential friends to check on him through the police? My face must have given me away, because Serena smiled triumphantly. That's right. I knew you were capable of something. You didn't just express doubts. You've already started hunting the man I love. Siren, let me explain. There's nothing to explain, she cut him off. It's clear. You've decided to destroy my happiness because it doesn't fit into your plans. She turned and headed for the exit, but at the door she turned around. You know what, Dad? Maybe we really should hurry up with the wedding. The sooner I marry Ethan, the sooner I'll be free of your control. With that, she left the restaurant, leaving me alone at the table under the curious glances of the other patrons. I finished my wine and paid the bill, realizing that my attempts to reason with my daughter had not only failed, but had made the situation worse. The drive home took an hour, and the whole time I agonized over what to do next. Serena was right about one thing. I really didn't trust Ethan and had already started checking him out. But she was wrong in thinking it was about money or control. It was about my paternal instinct, which was screaming danger. A gloomy Vivian was waiting for me at home. How was dinner? She asked. It couldn't have been worse, I replied and told her about the scandal. What are we going to do? Wait for the results of the investigation. If Ethan is honest, I'll publicly apologize and give him a chance. If not, if not, she'll never forgive us. I nodded, realizing that we were trapped. Any action we took now would be perceived as an attempt to destroy her happiness, and inaction could lead to disaster if our suspicions were confirmed. After the scandal at the restaurant, the atmosphere in our house became unbearable. Serena hardly ever came home, spending all her time at university or with her friends, and when she did come home, she pointedly ignored us. At breakfast, she didn't look up from her phone, answering our questions with monosyllables or not answering at all. Vivian suffered the most. She had always been very close to her daughter, and this silence broke her heart. By Friday, the tension had reached its peak. The house, which had always been our fortress and place of peace, had turned into a battlefield where every word could provoke a new conflict. Vivian suggested we go to our estate in Napa Valley for the weekend to give everyone a chance to cool off and think about the situation in a calm environment. Maybe in 2 days, Serena will calm down and be more receptive to talking, she said over breakfast on Friday morning. Serena was just coming down the stairs with her bag over her shoulder, getting ready for college. Hearing her mother's words, she stopped. "Where are you going?" she asked coldly. "To Napa for the weekend," Vivian replied. "Would you like to come with us? Fresh air, peace and quiet. Maybe we'll be able to talk calmly." "No, thank you. I have plans for the weekend." "What plans?" I couldn't help asking. Siren shot me an angry look. "It's none of your business. I'm a grown woman and I can spend my time however I want." "Of course you can, dear," Vivian said softly. "We're just worried." "Don't worry. Ethan will be with me. He'll take good care of me." With that, she left the house, slamming the door behind her. Vivian and I exchanged glances. Spending the weekend alone with Ethan was exactly what we feared most, but we couldn't stop her now. By noon, we had packed our things and set off for Napa Valley in my Porsche Cayenne. The drive took an hour and a half, and gradually the hustle and bustle of the city gave way to picturesque hills covered with vineyards. Our estate was located on 200 acres of land, with its own vineyard, winery, and Tuscan-style villa. I bought this land 10 years ago as an investment, but over time I grew to love this place and often came here to relax from business. The weekend passed quietly, but without much joy. We walked through the vineyards, read, played tennis on our own court, and had candlelit dinners on the terrace overlooking the valley. Normally, such a vacation would have brought us great pleasure, but now our thoughts kept returning to Serena and her mysterious fiancé. On Saturday evening, Blake called me. "Dad, how are you?" "How's Cyrene?" "Not good. She won't even talk to us." "What's the detective saying?" "Connor's working on it. Nothing concrete yet, but he's checking the addresses Ethan gave him. He says he'll have the full picture by Monday." "Has Roderick found out anything?" "Nothing yet. But you know how long these federal checks take on Sunday morning." I tried to call Serena, but she didn't answer. Vivian tried to call her too, with no luck. By lunchtime, we were both seriously worried. "Maybe we should go home," Vivian suggested. "Let's wait until tonight." We don't want to look paranoid, but by evening, the anxiety had become unbearable. Serena wasn't answering her calls or texts. This wasn't like her. No matter how angry she was, she always let us know she was okay. "That's it, I can't wait any longer," I said at 6 in the evening. "Let's go home." The drive back seemed endless. I was speeding, passing other cars, and Vivian was nervously fiddling with her purse. We both felt that something was wrong, but we didn't want to voice our fears. By 8 o'clock, we were home. Serena's car wasn't in the garage, but that didn't mean anything. She could be at Ethan's or at her friends' houses. The house greeted us with its usual silence and the coolness of the air conditioner. "Serena," Vivian called. "We're home." There was no answer. We went upstairs and looked into our daughter's room. The door was open, but the room looked strangely empty. It took me a moment to realize what was bothering me. Her personal belongings were gone. Her favorite photos from the dresser, jewelry from the dressing table, expensive bags from the closet. "Declan," Vivian called softly. "Look here." She was standing by the open closet. Most of the clothes were gone. Only everyday items remained, and all the expensive dresses, suits, and shoes were gone. "What does this mean?" Vivian whispered, panic in her voice. I felt something cold squeeze my stomach. This didn't look like a weekend trip, but an escape. But why would Serene run away? And more importantly, where? Let's check the whole house, I said, trying to stay calm. We quickly looked through the other rooms. Everything was in place, no signs of forced entry or robbery. Last, I went into my study on the first floor. What I saw made me stop dead in my tracks. The door of the safe was open. My antique German safe, which stood in the corner of the study behind Vivian's portrait. The safe whose combination was known only to me, Vivian, and the children. My hands were shaking as I approached the safe and looked inside. The documents were there, as was Vivian's jewelry, but the cash was gone, exactly $250,000, which I always kept at home in case of emergencies. It was completely gone, down to the last bill. On the shelf of the safe was a white envelope with my name written in Serena's familiar handwriting. I picked it up with trembling hands and opened it. Dad, we need this money more than you do. You're already rich, but Ethan and I are just starting out in life. We'll use it for our future. Don't try to look for us. We'll be far away. Maybe someday you'll realize that true love is more valuable than money. Serena. I reread the note several times, unable to believe what was happening. My daughter, who grew up in luxury, received the best education and was raised on the principles of honesty and decency, stole $250,000 from her own father. Declan, what's going on? Vivian entered the office and saw my face. What's wrong? I silently handed her the note. She read it and sank into a chair, turning pale as chalk. That's impossible, she whispered. Serena couldn't have. She never took anything that didn't belong to her, even as a child. But she did, and she wasn't alone. Ethan was with her. I took out my phone and dialed Roderick's number. Fortunately, he answered right away. Roderick, we have a problem. A big problem. What happened? Siren disappeared with Ethan. They stole $250,000 in cash from my safe. There was a pause. Damn, Roderick exhaled. Declan, I was just about to call you. I got the results of the check. And Ethan Reynolds is a professional con man. His real name is Ethan Mark Coleman, 32 years old, born in Detroit. Over the past 5 years, he has defrauded at least 7 wealthy women in different states. I felt the room spinning before my eyes. Go on. The pattern is always the same. He meets heiresses from wealthy families, charms them, quickly proposes marriage, and then disappears with their money or valuables. In Texas, he took $200,000 from one girl, supposedly to invest in their joint business. In Florida, he tricked a banker into giving him $300,000 under the pretext of buying a house. Has he been prosecuted? Twice, but both cases were closed because the girls refused to testify, fearing publicity. One even defended him in court, claiming that she had given him the money voluntarily. And the hedge fund? Reynolds Capital Partners doesn't exist. It never did. There's just a nice-looking website with fake reports and false recommendations. I sank into a chair, feeling a wave of rage and despair wash over me. This man didn't just deceive my daughter. He turned her into an accomplice to a crime. Roderick, what should I do? Report it to the police immediately. I have contacts in the fraud department. They'll be able to put out a warrant for them quickly. What about Serena? She's a criminal now, too. Formally, yes. But if we can prove that she was under influence, we can negotiate leniency. Vivian sniffed, pressing a handkerchief to her eyes. How could he have fooled her? She's so smart, so educated. These people are professionals, Roderick said. They know how to play on emotions, how to inspire trust. Coleman studied your family. He surely knew about Serena's character, her desire for independence. So he chose her as his victim on purpose? Almost certainly. Con artists like that don't act on impulse. They plan every step. I got up and walked over to the window. Outside, the garden where Serena had played as a child was growing dark. Back then, everything was so simple. I could protect her from any danger, solve any problem. And now my own daughter had become a criminal. Roderick, is there any chance of finding them quickly? If they're smart, they're already far away. They may even have left the country. Coleman has experience with disappearances, and if they're not very smart, then they'll be caught within a week. $250,000 in cash isn't an amount that's easy to hide. They'll have to spend or exchange it somewhere. I've made my decision. Okay, I'll file a report with the police tomorrow morning. In the meantime, contact all your contacts. Have them look for Ethan Coleman and my daughter. I will. Declan, hang in there. We'll find her. After talking to Roderick, I called Siren again. Her phone was turned off. I tried to reach her through social media, but her accounts had been deleted or blocked. Blake arrived half an hour after my call. Seeing our faces, he immediately realized that something serious had happened. Your sister stole $250,000 and ran off with a con man, I said without preamble. Blake listened to the whole story in silence. His face hardened with every word. That bastard used her, he finally said. She doesn't even realize she's become an accomplice to a crime. Whether she realizes it or not, the fact remains. She stole our money. Dad, you're not going to sue her, are you? I was silent for a long time, thinking about this question. On the one hand, Serena was my daughter, and I loved her no matter what. On the other hand, she had committed a serious crime and had to be held accountable. I don't know, I replied honestly. First we have to find them. Then we'll figure it out. Vivian looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. What if we don't find them? What if she's gone forever? We'll find them, I said firmly. We'll definitely find them. And then this Coleman guy will learn what it means to deceive the Mortensen family. Blake nodded. I'll call in all my contacts. Private investigators, security services, everyone I know, me too, I added. I have connections in the banking world. If they try to cash out or invest the stolen money, we'll find out. We spent the entire evening putting together a search plan. We contacted Detective Connor, who immediately activated his network of informants. Roderick activated his contacts in law enforcement. By midnight, the search for Ethan Coleman and Serena Mortensen had begun across the country. As I went to bed, I still couldn't believe what had happened. Just a week ago, my family had been happy and prosperous. Now my daughter was a fugitive, and our home was filled with an atmosphere of mourning. But I knew one thing for sure. Wherever they were hiding, I would find them. And then Ethan Coleman would realize he had picked the wrong family for his fraudulent games. 2 days of searching yielded no results. The police followed standard protocols, private investigators combed through hotels and airports, but Ethan Coleman and Serena seemed to have vanished into thin air. Their bank accounts showed no activity, their credit cards had not been used, and their cell phones remained turned off. A professional con artist knew how to hide from pursuit. On Wednesday morning, Detective Connor called me. Mr. Mortensen, I have some information. One of my sources in Las Vegas reported a couple matching the description at the Venetian casino. The man is spending large amounts of cash, and the woman looks depressed. Are you sure it's them? Not yet, but the surveillance photos are very similar. I'll email you the pictures. A few minutes later, I received blurry images from the security cameras. The quality wasn't perfect, but the man's silhouette definitely resembled Ethan, and the woman next to him could be Serena. She was sitting hunched over at the gaming table, looking as if the world was falling apart around her. What do we do? Connor asked. Watch and wait. Don't scare them off. I need time to prepare. I contacted Roderick immediately. In 2 days, my friend had turned into the command center for the operation to capture the fugitives. His connections in law enforcement worked day and night, and he himself hardly left his office. Roderick, they're in Vegas. We need a plan, official or unofficial. What do you mean? If it's official, we bring in the Nevada police, arrest them right in the casino, and then it all goes through the courts. Slowly, publicly, with the guarantee that Coleman will get a good lawyer and deny everything to the end. And unofficially, I have people in Vegas, former federal agents now working in the private sector. They can take them quietly without unnecessary fuss. Bring them here for a chat. I understood that Roderick was proposing to act outside the law. But the thought of this crook dragging the case through the courts for years while my daughter sat in prison as an accomplice made me furious. How long will it take them? 6 to 8 hours. They'll pick them up from the casino and bring them here in a private plane. They'll be here by morning. Do it. Roderick gave me the phone number of a man named Marcus, who was coordinating the operation in Nevada. He was a former FBI agent with 20 years of experience, who after retiring had organized a company to solve sensitive issues for wealthy clients. Mr. Mortensen, Marcus said in a low, hoarse voice. Roderick explained the situation. We'll pick them up tonight when they leave the casino. What if they don't leave? They will. Sooner or later, everyone leaves. We have people on the inside who will track their movements. I want the girl to be treated with care. She's my daughter, understood. And the man? Do whatever you think is necessary with the man. That evening, I called an emergency family meeting. Vivian, Blake, and I sat in the living room while the garden slowly darkened outside the windows. My wife looked exhausted. 2 days of sleeplessness and constant stress had taken their toll. Blake was somber and focused, as he always was in crisis situations. They were found in Las Vegas, I reported. They'll be brought here tonight. Legally? Blake asked. Not exactly. Vivian looked up. Declan, what are you up to? I want to talk to that bastard personally. Find out the truth about his plans and how he deceived Siren. What if he doesn't want to talk? He will, I said grimly. Blake nodded in understanding. My son knew that sometimes you have to be tough in business, and he understood my motives. Vivian looked worried, but she didn't protest. She also wanted to know the truth about the man who had destroyed our family. At 1:30 in the morning, a black SUV with no license plates pulled up to the gate. Marcus turned out to be a short, stocky man in his 50s, with cold gray eyes and a scar on his left cheek. He gave a brief report on the results of the operation. We picked them up at the casino exit at 11 p.m. local time. The guy tried to resist. The girl was in shock. We found the money in the safe in their room, $187,000 in cash. He must have lost the rest at the casino. Where are they now? In the van at the gate. The guy is tied up, and the girl is under a light sedative. She was hysterical. Take them into the house, Marcus motioned to his men. Ethan Coleman was led out of the van with his hands tied behind his back, and Serena, who could barely stand on her feet. My daughter looked terrible. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smudged, her dress wrinkled. When she saw me, her eyes flashed with a mixture of fear, shame, and despair. Dad, she whispered. Be quiet, I snapped. Be quiet for now. Ethan, on the other hand, tried to remain defiant even in this situation. You have no right to keep me here. This is kidnapping. I demand a lawyer. Shut up, Marcus said calmly and pushed him gently toward the house. We went down to the basement, which I had once converted into a wine cellar, but now it looked more like an interrogation room. Roderick was already waiting for us there, sitting in a chair with a glass of whiskey in his hand. His face showed the cold determination of a man who was prepared to go as far as necessary. Marcus tied Ethan to a heavy wooden chair in the center of the room. Siren was seated on a sofa in the corner, where she could see and hear everything that was happening. Marcus's 2 guards stood by the door. So, Mr. Coleman, I began, approaching the bound swindler, I think it's time to tell the truth. I don't know what you're talking about. My name is Ethan Reynolds. I'm an investment fund manager. Marcus silently approached him and punched him in the stomach. Not hard, but enough to knock the wind out of him. Dad, no! Siren cried, trying to get up from the sofa. Sit down, I ordered without turning around, and listen carefully. Now you're going to learn the truth about your fiancé. Ethan coughed and tried to catch his breath. Your real name is Ethan Mark Coleman, Roderick continued, reading from a piece of paper. 32 years old, born in Detroit, convicted twice for fraud, wanted in at least 3 states. That's a lie, Coleman gasped. Marcus hit him again, this time in the face. Blood ran from his nose. Siren, Coleman shouted. Tell them! You know who I am. Siren was silent, staring at him with wide eyes. For the first time since she had known him, she saw his real face, without his charming smile and confidence. Over the past 5 years, you've deceived 7 girls from wealthy families, Roderick continued. You've embezzled a total of over $2 million. Would you like me to read out the names of your victims? Go to hell! This time Marcus punched him in the ribs. Coleman doubled over, groaning in pain. Dad, please stop. I'm sorry, Sirena cried. I understand everything. I was wrong. No, dear, I said, turning to her for the first time that evening. You weren't just wrong. You helped him steal our money. So you're going to sit quietly and listen to your beloved tell the whole truth. I nodded to Marcus, and he hit Coleman again. How long did you study my family before you met my daughter? I asked. I don't know. I didn't research anyone. Another blow made him scream. How long? I repeated louder. 3 months, he shouted. I researched your family for 3 months. Serena sobbed, covering her mouth with her hands. What exactly did you study? Financial situation? Habits? Personalities? I knew Serena was studying at USC, interning at the consulate. I knew she was romantic and liked to prove her independence. And you decided to take advantage of that? Yes, yes, damn it. That's my job. Did you ever have any feelings for her? Coleman raised his head and looked directly at Serena. There was not a trace of regret in his eyes. No, never. She was just a job. Another stupid rich girl who thinks the world revolves around her feelings. Serena groaned as if in physical pain. What about love? The marriage proposal? It was all an act, to get her to agree to what I wanted faster. What exactly? Access to your money. I knew about the safe in your office. I knew there was cash in there. The plan was simple. Marry her, get access to the family finances, and then disappear. But you didn't wait for the wedding. She offered to take the money herself. Coleman tried to smile despite his broken face. She said she wanted to prove her independence to her parents. I just played along with her childish rebellion. What did you plan to do next? Disappear. I had a ticket to Buenos Aires for Monday. Serena thought we were going on our honeymoon. And in reality? In reality, I would have left her at the airport and flown away alone. With the money. Serena burst into tears, burying her face in the sofa cushion. All her illusions, all her dreams of great love, collapsed in an instant. She realized that she had been nothing more than a tool in the hands of a professional con artist. Is there anything else we need to know? Roderick asked. Go to hell, all of you, Coleman croaked. Marcus raised his hand to strike again, but I stopped him with a gesture. That's enough. We've learned everything we wanted to know. I walked over to Serena and sat down next to her on the sofa. Now, do you understand what happened? She nodded without lifting her head. Do you understand that you became an accomplice to a crime? Yes, she whispered. And do you understand that your mother and I tried to warn you? Yes. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry for everything. I hugged my daughter, feeling her tremble with sobs. My anger toward her gradually gave way to pity. Yes, she had committed a crime, but she was as much a victim as she was a criminal. Marcus, I said, standing up, hand Mr. Coleman over to the police. Let them deal with him according to the law. And the girl? The girl stays at home. Under house arrest until we decide what to do next. Coleman was taken out of the basement. An hour later, he was being questioned by Los Angeles police detectives on official charges of fraud, theft, and illegal crossing of state lines. The money was returned to our safe, but I didn't feel victorious. Yes, the fraudster had been caught and would be punished. Yes, the money had been returned to the family. But something important had been destroyed forever. My relationship with Serena had changed dramatically. She was no longer my little princess who believed in fairy tales about handsome princes. She had become a woman who had learned that the world could be cruel and cynical, that people were capable of meanness and betrayal, and I was no longer her almighty father who could protect her from any misfortune. Now she knew that I was capable of cruelty, that in a critical situation I could act outside the law. That night, when it was all over, we sat in the living room. Me, Vivian, Blake, and Serena. No one knew what to say. Too much had happened in those few days. What happens next? Serena asked quietly. I don't know, I answered honestly. It depends on many factors. Whether the police will press charges against you, your testimony against Coleman, and many other things. What about our family? Are we still a family after all this? I was silent for a long time, thinking about my answer. Yes, we are a family, but a different family. We have all changed over these days, and there is no turning back. Serena nodded, realizing that the golden age of her carefree life was over forever. Now she had to live with the consequences of her decisions and learn to distinguish between truth and lies in human relationships. And I had to live with the understanding that sometimes love for one's family requires actions that go beyond the bounds of law and morality, and that the price for protecting loved ones may be higher than we are willing to pay. I summed up this story with three things. First, silence does not solve problems. It is important to talk about pain. Second, love without respect turns into humiliation. Third, sometimes leaving is not a weakness, but a strength. What do you think? Is it worth fighting to the end, or is it better to save yourself? Write your opinion in the comments and tell us where you are listening to us from.